All right, part 2 of week 11, I guess you could say. 4/7 is the current date, 4/7/2020. We're going to go ahead and finish up with sudden illnesses now. So, without anything else being said, I want to move into what's going to be happening for this next week. I want you to go ahead and pre-read the section that is sudden illnesses for poisonings. So, poisonings, as well as bites and stings. So pre-read that information, and we're going to go through that here in class on YouTube like we have been usually. What I need you to provide for me again, okay? Now this is going to be a big one, okay? This is going to be a pre-assignment, okay? I'm giving you 1 week from today to finish it, so I need it by 4/14/2020. Give it to me by 3 p.m. Email per usual. I want 1 page written, okay, covering the basic information for sudden illnesses, poisonings, bites, and stings, okay? These are more common things to happen that we're going to see in the heat of the moment. These are good ones to really know, the more common injuries that are easy to deal with, okay? I want to see you write a 1-page report, double-spaced, 12-point font like we have before, okay? Covering and summarizing this information. And I want you to dig into detail for 1 full paragraph onto something that you may have had experience with then as well. A lot of times it is one of these things, whether it's sudden illnesses, poisonings, bee stings, or other bites. Okay, look into those, write your own personal paragraph of something you've experienced, so I get a good idea of what you know of to do or how to respond per se. Let's get into it now. So sudden illnesses part 1. We always go back to our check, call, care. So check, call, care, right? We check the scene for safety. We check the person. We call 911 if the person's not breathing, not responding. We give our 10 seconds of care by looking down the body if they're unconscious. But if they are conscious, usually speaking with a lot of these things, they can tell us what's going on. We can help them along the way, and we can sometimes prevent even EMTs from being called. These are some of the things and signs we're going to look for though right away, and you've probably seen some of these things before. The person maybe has a severe change in their level of consciousness. They go into having a very erratic breathing pattern, maybe right asthma attacks we're thinking here. There could be signs of a possible heart attack going on, or a stroke. Other than that, the person could be losing vision. They could have blurred vision in general. They could be sweating profusely. They could be vomiting uncontrollably to the point where they're constantly nauseous. They could have diarrhea, so they're getting very dehydrated then too. They're looking like they have sunken in eyes. They could have severe abdominal pain and pressure going on. And another symptom could even be a seizure. Okay? They could be shaking violently on the ground, convulsing. These are all reasons to want to protect the person, so first and foremost, we do no further harm. We try to control the situation around, and we try to call 911 when we figure out that this is something severe, we need more help. So go ahead and monitor the person, right? When we are waiting for 911, we monitor their level of consciousness and their breathing. We might have to give CPR for all we know. If the person's conscious, we can ask them a lot of questions, right? We go through sample. Look at the signals. We ask them if they have any allergies, any medications they're on, any prescriptions, right? And then we can go on further with understanding how we can help them in the heat of the moment, understanding their condition. So keep them rested in the most comfortable position possible. If it's a child, sometimes just having the child being held by the parent can be very, very good in the heat of the moment, right? The child's having maybe an asthma attack. To administer the inhaler, you can hold the inhaler, and then the parent can hold the child at the same time, and maybe helps them with the comfort aspects. You might want to keep this person from getting overheated or over-chilled, so blankets or moving them into a shaded area. Other cares is needed then, depending on the situation, I guess. So you can ask them, like I said, the medical conditions. That's always a good thing to tell. With a stroke, right? Medical condition. Do you have high blood pressure? Are there any medications you're on? Good telltale of that. Okay, there's symptoms of a stroke going on. The person's also having a condition where they are already at risk of this. So we've analyzed it. We understand we need to call 911 immediately for something like that. We don't want to give peoples in these conditions anything to eat, anything to drink, unless it's something that has been told or prescribed, right? So like a heart attack. If the doctor said, yes, the person's authorized to have a baby aspirin, while these symptoms are happening, then we can help them do that. If the person is only authorized or allowed to have it at that moment, that's only exceptions. Otherwise, we don't give them anything to eat or drink, right? If they are having a stroke, they may not be able to swallow. They could choke. The main thing, if somebody is vomiting, right, convulsing on the ground and vomiting, we don't want to hold them in any position, but we need to roll them into that Haynes recovery position so that vomit can come out of their mouth and they don't impede their airflow. That way they can not choke. While we're looking at the person, if they're, for instance, unconscious, look for things like those medical ID tags. That's always good telltale things. That can, for instance, like you look at the bracelet or the necklace, and it has the shapes on it, the little snake with the shield or whatever it may be on. They all look a little bit different. But anyway, it might say diabetes. Now we have an idea that this person is having a diabetic emergency. We call 911. We tell them what's probably going on. Sometimes you might have to look through their stuff, right? Look through the lady's purse. Sometimes they carry their medications right there on them. Fainting spells. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen people faint. I'm sure it's more of a common thing than a lot of these other things that we've seen on here. This can happen just from being in a stuffy room where you're standing still for a long period of time. You got your knees locked out. You're not getting good blood flow back, and your heart rate's depressed. You just pass out. I've had a couple people do this in front of me, and it's more embarrassing than anything else, right? It's not something to really worry about. Only if they do hit their head right off the ground or fall onto something, that could cause them other further injuries. The main thing though is that signs of a fainting spell, right? They actually fall and collapse, but beforehand they might be sweating. They might be seeming like they're almost about to lose consciousness. They could look very pale as well then. So look for these possibilities. The main thing is that it's just loss of consciousness because there's been temporary reduction of blood flow to the brain. They should be fine once they hit the ground, really. They come usually popping back up pretty quick. But people can faint from other things, right? You see blood. Some people faint from seeing blood. Some people faint from losing blood. These are possibilities too. Main thing is that we try to make sure they're breathing, make sure they're okay. They're probably going to wake up pretty quickly. So what we can do is have the person lie down in the meantime, right? Just lay them on the ground. Sometimes if you have them sit though, have them try to lay down is better and get their head at the level, sometimes with their knees. So sometimes have them lift their knees up into like a 90-degree angle. So they're lying on their back, their knees are up. That can help with blood flow. Usually though, these are self-corrected or harmless. So the times that we're really worried are when people hit their head off of something. They hit off of a cabinet as they fall or onto the ground possibly. If you ever see a person start collapsing though, it would be great if you could catch them, right? You can lower them to the ground safely onto a flat surface. You can position them on their blacks, their flat. You can loosen up their tie if they have a necktie on or their shirt. That might help with them breathing. You can fan them off a little bit. Make sure they're breathing though. The thing is, if they're not breathing, that's when we have to perform CPR possibly. We have to make sure their airway is open, that means. So lie them down, open up their airway, look down their body for 10 seconds. If we don't open up the airway, how are we going to know if the airway is open or not? So we have to make sure there's breathing going on. Check for those things. Sometimes these people could vomit. So again, like usual, we roll them to their side, let that happen. Call 911 if the person does not wake up, right? Or if there's further injuries than what happened. Diabetic emergencies. These are times when a person has the inability to change glucose from food into energy. That's basically what's going on here. Now the body has some primary functions, and the pancreas, it has some important aspects to handle here. And that's going to be insulin, utilizing insulin, or I should say secreting insulin, and helping sugar or glucose get to the musculature of the human body. It kind of works all hand in hand. Carbohydrates, when we ingest them, they're turned into simpler things called basic sugars, glucose. And glucose is transported in the bloodstream, and insulin is going to help that shuttle directly into the musculature for storage as glycogen. The human body can roughly store about 400 grams of glycogen a day at any one given time. Okay, I should say. So with that being said, 400 grams, that's roughly 1,600 calories of energy from carbohydrates. There's no reason to really eat any more than that per day since you can't store anymore. So carb loading, right? 400 grams, what's the point of going anymore? Point of going more is while you're doing activity, replenish while you go. That makes sense, right? Have more as you go. But beforehand, 400 is all you're going to get. So fill your reserves as much as possible. There's no point in overflow. Turns into fat. But we can become desensitized. That's where diabetes comes into play. Some people are born with a problem. Some people, that problem is chronic. They chronically abuse sugar in their body, and the body becomes desensitized to insulin over time. It may even stop producing. So let's go over these basic types here. Type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is formerly known as juvenile diabetes because mostly it's recognized when it's a child. If you know football, since we're in Illinois here, probably some Bears fans here. Jay Cutler, the former quarterback of the Bears, he had juvenile diabetes, but he didn't find out until I think he was even like 18 years old that he had this going on. So if you ever saw him on the sidelines of the games, he'd be eating like a PB&J or a banana or a sub sandwich, who knows? Like he doesn't care about the game. It's not that he doesn't care about the game, it's that he has to manage his diabetes. He needed an insulin spike. He needed a sugar spike at that moment. He needed some energy at that moment. Otherwise, he would not have been able to perform as good as he should, right? His mind could get foggy, his body could become shaky. He needed those calories at that moment to get his body going. So it made sense. So main thing going on here is that a person with juvenile or type 1 diabetes, they produce little or no insulin, right? So that insulin is not opening up gateways for the musculature to hold on to it, to utilize that sugar, to store it and use it as muscular fuel, muscular energy. So with these people, oftentimes an insulin injection is necessary. Either call 911 if they have it with them. You do not want to have to do this, but I guess technically speaking, right, we need to call 911 and get somebody who is authorized to do this injection. So if they can self-authorize, that's great. If you have somebody that's close to authorize, that's great too. At all costs, we don't want to have to do this, so we want to call 911 because we don't know how to properly give this type of injection. If they have a medication by mouth that we can help them take, absolutely good. We can do those things. Again, make sure they're coherent. If they are unconscious, we always call 911. Type 2 diabetes, okay, this is more common type. This is where you have a chronic problem where it's usually later on your body is not producing enough insulin to produce or meet the needs that the body has, or maybe the body's even resistant then to insulin. At these times, sometimes the person just needs a little bit of candy or a little bit of sugar pick-me-up. A lifesaver, so to speak, would be perfect situation to help that person out. So have them suck on a lifesaver. That can sometimes help with this problem, if they're conscious and coherent. Now, there's two different possible aspects that could be happening here, though. The person could have hyperglycemia, or they could have hypoglycemia. So let's go ahead and define these two. Hyperglycemia. That's when the insulin levels are too low and blood sugar is far too high. So there's a lot of blood in the bloodstream, but it's not going to the musculature, for instance, to be used as energy. The opposite would be a hypoglycemia. A hypoglycemia is when insulin level is too high, right? Insulin now is too high with hypoglycemia, and blood sugar level is too low. Okay, so either or could be happening at this moment. The person could be feeling very shaky. They could be even losing consciousness, for all we know. Their mood could change. They could become very angry all of a sudden, or they could become very depressed all of a sudden. Their breathing could become very irregular. They could look very, very pale, or they could be just laying down with their head on the table, for all we know, not moving. Their skin could look very abnormal in color, so look for those things. They could be complaining of a severe headache or dizziness. They could even be very confused. So if they are conscious and can swallow, again, give them some sugar. That's like a sugar tablet. A piece of candy is perfect. Have them suck on a Werther's Original or a Lifesaver. Give them some Skittles, a bite of a Milky Way. If they can drink juice, do a juice, like fruit juice. You could even do milk, technically speaking, because that's got sugar in it. Obviously, non-diet sodas. So a regular Coca-Cola or a Pepsi product, Mountain Dew, any other brands, and as long as it has real sugar in it, that's going to be great for having them sip on. You can even take sugar and dissolve it into water. That suffices. Kool-Aid, right? The main thing is that we do not administer the insulin shots ourselves. Okay, that's not something we're authorized to do. So we'd rather call 911 if the situation is getting worse. So again, we call 911 if they're unconscious, if they lose consciousness, if they're unable to swallow, if after 5 to 6 minutes the situation isn't getting any better, right? Or if you can't find any form of sugar immediately, right? Call 911 as well. Let's move into seizures. I've seen several. I've seen about 4 or 5 in my lifetime. 3 or 4 different people too. Sometimes these are common things for people, so you don't have to get so alarmed. But sometimes we want to make sure we're getting things controlled, calling 911, because this could be a far worse problem. So normal functions of the brain could be disrupted, and as a result, we have abnormal electrical activity in the brain. And when that happens, a seizure can arise, right? And a seizure could be a temporary involuntary change of the body's movement. They could be like becoming rigid and shaking violently. So there could be changes in body movement, changes in bodily functions. There could be changes in physical sensations, their awareness level, right? And then even just their generalized behavior. These can all be out of whack. For these types, okay, we're looking at all sorts of types of seizures, but we're going to just focus on looking at the major symptoms, right, and the major signals. Our first priority, though, is to give care, and that's to protect the person from any further injuries. So when you notice that a seizure is happening, ensure that there's no other structures that could cause harm around that person, like a table or chairs, or maybe they're holding a glass or groceries, they fell down. We want to move all these things around that are near the person away, so that they can't hit themselves off of something. If they're next to a wall, we want to drag them away from the wall so they can't hit their head off the wall or something like that, right? So keep them from getting further injuries. And make sure that the airway is open. It's not that we're holding their airway open the whole time, but it's that we're making sure that they can breathe, right? We don't want to hold their head still, because then the rest of their body's shaking. We can cause a head, neck, or spinal cord injury just by holding them still. We never want to hold somebody still when they're going through a seizure. We want to let the seizure happen. We just want to ensure that they're breathing, okay? We don't want to put anything in their mouth. We don't want to have any objects around them. What we can do is as the seizure passes, we can lay the person on their side in that Haynes recovery position, check for other injuries, and then offer comfort and reassurance that everything's going to be okay, because they can probably hear you a lot of times with what's going on. They just can't make any controlling actions because they're stuck in that seizure, that abnormal brain activity state. Try to keep them calm, right? Talk to them as they're regaining their consciousness. Say their name, tell them who you are, right? You just went through this little seizure episode. Is this something that is normal for you? You could ask. You could ask them, little questions about, do you know where you're at right now? Do you want me to call somebody for you? Sometimes these things are regular for the person, so they don't want anybody called. If it happened on campus, we have a great response system called security. We'll have the medical team on campus come see the person, perhaps. So these are reasons to call 911 for a seizure, though. Okay, if it lasts more than 5 minutes, if you have a seizure lasting 5 minutes or more, we call 911 immediately. If it's repetitive, right, they don't slow down, it keeps happening. Sometimes it's an epileptic seizure where it's lights and sounds are making the person seize, right? Call 911 immediately for these. If the person seems further injured, if they're not breathing, if the person's pregnant or you're really uncertain what to do, right, we want to call 911. If the person has known diabetes, call 911. If it is a child or an infant, we definitely want to call 911. Sometimes we could have what's known as a febrile seizure, where it's a baby's body temperature is getting up very high and they start to seize, then violently shake. We need to cool this baby down. We gotta call 911, get some baby help. If the person doesn't regain consciousness after a seizure, we would definitely want to call 911. And if it's the first time they ever have one, good reason to call 911 too. We want to figure out what's going on. This could be leading to a bigger problem than what's going on at the heat of the moment. For strokes, okay, this is a good one. This is something we could see in our lifetime very easily. So it's good to recognize the signs and symptoms of this. So let's go ahead and talk about what a stroke is first and foremost. We had a heart attack earlier where we had, right, the heart stops beating or it's quivering and not able to function properly, so we can't circulate blood. Well, now we're looking at the brain having a problem instead, where it's not circulating blood correctly. We have a problem with blood getting to a certain structure in the brain, or there could be bleeding in the brain, so to speak, then too, where that could cause a lack of blood supply to certain structures or blood on the brain. What we need to know is that what we're seeing is blood flow is being cut off to the brain here foremost. And this can be from a blood clot, which is most often the problems. It can be from a ruptured artery in the brain. Maybe we've even heard of things like aneurysms too. These are where there's a popping of a vessel and bleeding on the brain. We're looking at all sorts of things with this, but they're all going to have very similar symptoms and signs going on here. It is imperative that we call 911 immediately when we suspect anything even close to a stroke going on. These can come without warning. So first thing we want to do, okay, we want to look and feel, look for the feelings that the person's having. We want to ask them questions. Hey, are you okay right now, right? Look at their face. Sometimes portion of their face could be drooping down, signaling that there could be irregular electrical activity going on for motor control of facial structures to one half of the body. The face could be drooping, they could be drooling, they could have numbness or tingling, or that could even be going down their arm or down their leg too with this tingling or numbness for a stroke. Their vision could be distorted or completely lost then too. They could have a very severe headache. My grandmother, she suffered from a brain aneurysm. She had the most intense headache she's ever experienced in her entire life, and within hours later she had the brain aneurysm, and she unfortunately did pass away from that. A lot of these things are unavoidable, but if we can detect them sooner, right, the better. Maybe she could have been helped out if we would have recognized that sooner, if she would have said something quicker. Other things going into, the person could be very dizzy, they could be confused, they could be agitated, they could be losing consciousness, they could have trouble walking or balancing, their coordination could be completely off, they could have a ringing in their ear going on, they could wet themselves, they could go to the bathroom on themselves, all reasons and signs of a stroke. We want to know this acronym, okay? So write this down. This is a very good acronym, and this is a test question always, okay? For stroke, always think of FAST, F-A-S-T. FAST stands for face, arm, speech, and time. So when we're talking about face, arm, speech, time, first you look at the face. You ask the person to smile. If they smile and only one half of the face, right, goes up, first telltale that they're probably having a stroke. What we could also do is have them then raise their arms. So we had face, now we're moving to arms. Have them take their arms out to their sides, like out in front of them, and have them raise them up. And if they go up the normal pace, that's great. But if they raise them up and then the one goes up faster than the other one, and they got the drooping face, odds are that they have motor impairment as well, right? So they have face, they have arms, they're not going up equal. Speech, their speech could be slurred, okay? Or it could be very difficult for them to speak. They could hear something and say something totally weird to you, right? That's signs that certain structures of the brain could be affected. We have Broca's, Wernicke's areas that are for interpreting speech and making speech happen. Okay, how now, brown cow? Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I don't know if you need to make it that hard. Unique New York. I don't know. Something, whatever you guys want to do it. You know, have them say something. Have them just say their address and their full name and today's date. If they could say that clearly, not a stroke. If they can't say it clearly and it's a lot of slurring, odds are now if we have those other two criteria going on with face and arms, definitely a stroke going on here. T stands for time. We note the time of when we saw these symptoms happening, and we call 911 and we tell them what's going on. This person's going to need medical help immediately. We need to go to a hospital to help save their life possibly. So again, call 911, note the time, tell them what's going on, keep the person as comfortable as possible. If they are unconscious, give CPR if necessary, and monitor their condition. You can always lay them in the Haynes recovery position to remove vomit if they do that. And then other things we can do, don't give them anything to eat or drink in the meantime. Try to keep them rested in the most comfortable position possible. That is a great place to end for the week. We are again back to rolling online. Your homework again next week. Make sure you read through the booklet and find out information on poisonings and bites and stings, write your one whole page and email it to me. Again, one full page covering sudden illnesses, poisonings, bites and stings, with a whole paragraph pertaining to something that you have personal knowledge with. Thank you so much, and per usual, go ahead and email me at fog0845@yahoo.com. But school email is perfect. KYLE_FOGLE@ivcc.edu. All right. I'll be posting some of these to Blackboard, but again, primarily we'll be working through email like usual. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Take care, everybody.